him in Melbourne just a short time ago. Jeff Kennet, thanks for joining us. Why should Daniel Andrews not have an extension of the powers that he's exercising now for another 12 months?
Because, Chris, today he has sent out a message to every business in Victoria and every potential investor from outside Victoria into Victoria that we're going to live under a state of emergency for another 12 months. Right now, our industry is closed, so much of it. Right now, our shops are for lease or for sale. Right now, our unemployment levels are rising. Regardless of what happens in the Parliament, the Premier has sent out a signal that there will be a state of emergency. That is his mindset. And if you're going to invest millions of dollars, you won't be investing in a state where the Premier is so terribly, terribly anti-business. And you know, Chris, I never thought I'd say this. John Setka runs the CMFEU down here. He's the only one, I think, who has any influence over the Premier. And I say to John Setka very, very clearly, you better get on the blower to the Premier pretty quickly. Because if he goes ahead with this, there won't be one of the CMFEU members who has a job next year. There will be no major construction sites. Those people will be joining the unemployment line. So something has got to give very, very quickly. Otherwise, Victoria is condemned in so many ways again to being a basket case.
So you're saying it sends out a very bleak picture to business and investors about an extended shutdown. What about to Victorians themselves? Any hope and aspirations, especially as you're seeing infection rates in the broader community fall down to very close to acceptable levels now?
Well, we're going to get there, and we're going to have to manage this virus. The Premier said today he might keep a state of emergency in place until we have a vaccine. We may never have a vaccine. We don't have a vaccine for SARS. So what's he talking about, for goodness sake? Name one other state that has curfews. Are we all going to be locked up at the whim of the Premier without any checks and balances? This is an act of a megalomaniac.
Well, that's a strong word, but this is the point here, isn't it? That even before...
Well, I don't think... Chris, I don't think I have ever called the Premier a name. I respect his office, and I've always called him Premier or Mr Andrews. But this is absolutely diabolical because of the message it sends out. I mean, some of these buildings here cost $4-5 billion. There'll be no more. There'll be no more jobs.
Well, you mentioned the word megalomaniac. Do you suggest that Daniel Andrews is actually letting this situation get the better of him? He's not actually understanding the need for government restraint, for government not to impose rules on everybody. Victoria had the toughest rules of any state before the so-called second wave, so it obviously didn't help because states that have had a lighter touch have been more successful.
We have not been a state that has tried to live and manage with this virus. We've been a state that has imposed restrictions on people to the extent that individual freedoms are out the wall. Daniel actually said recently we mightn't be able to celebrate Christmas with our children and grandchildren. Well, let me tell him, the grandmothers of this state, armed with umbrellas, will walk to the houses with their children and grandchildren to celebrate Christmas. Now, instead of offering us hope, he's saying, oh, we're going to extend this state of emergency for another 12 months. It can't happen because if it does happen, there will be no Victoria as we know it today. And it's pretty bad right now. There is no hope here. And this Premier is driving us and our economy into the ground.
Can this be blocked in the upper house? Do you expect it could be blocked in the upper house? And while you're at it, is there a role for Canberra to step in here, for Scott Morrison to try and exert at least some moral influence, some rhetorical influence over what's happening in Victoria?
The upper house, the government obviously has control in the lower house. In the upper house, control is held by about 9 independents. They have a track record of voting with the government. However, that doesn't necessarily mean they will when this legislation comes to the Parliament, and I hope they join with the opposition in throwing it out. But even if they do, the Premier has sent out a message today if you're thinking of spending money, investing in Victoria, don't, because I don't rate and value you. So in terms of the issue of Upper House, we'll just have to wait and see. But I hope someone gets to the Premier pretty quickly indeed, because the damage has already started. There will be people in Sydney and Perth and overseas who have got investment programs on their deck and they say, hang on, we're going to invest in Victoria. But God, there's going to be a state of emergency there for all of 2021. Well, we don't want to start investing in a state of emergency. So already the message has gone out.
So nothing for Scott Morrison to do here? His hands are tied behind his back?
Well, I don't know what he can do. We're a sovereign state. I mean, there's a lot of things I'd like to do right now, I can tell you, but I can't do any of it. A, because I'm a citizen. Secondly, I enjoy my curfewed freedom and I don't want to spend time in jail. But this is madness.
Jeff,
this is absolute madness.
Jeff Kennet, thanks so much for joining us.
Great pleasure, Chris. Have a good day. Well, you're in Sydney, aren't you?
I am indeed.
Well, you're a very lucky man. Stay there, because the goons will get you down here.
Thanks again, Jeff.
Righto, Chris.